All right, we're back in the kitchen today with another original meal in a jar recipe. Well, I say original, I had a little help from Gordon Ramsay, but he doesn't know it. So let's see what we can do. I know I can't improve on his recipe, but I have tried to adjust it to meet our needs for canning. So I think it's going to be a really good one. Welcome to Garden Preserve. I'm Carter, and I'm so glad you're here today. So this is going to be a little bit different. Normally when I have an original recipe, by the time you see me do it for you, that's at least my third time, if not my fourth time making it. Like, you know, the bean meal in a jar recipe, that was the fourth time because I really wanted to check the behavior of those beans and make sure it was going to turn out right for you. So this is my second time doing this. Normally my first time is really the proof of concept. Okay, is this going to work? Is it going to look like what I want it to look like in the bowl? Is it going to taste right? Is it going to be a full meal? Is it going to, whatever, right? Then the second one is nailing down the ingredients, the exact recipe that I want to use. So then the third time is usually the one where I present it to you. So on this one though, because I started with Gordon's recipe that was truly delicious on its own, I'm going to make a few adjustments as I tweaked it for canning. You know how canning can sometimes make some things more intense and some things kind of fade away. So I'm going to tweak it a little bit for what I found with that. I did my first batch of this and we have tried it and you're going to see it. So as we go along today, I'm not going to be giving you, if I can break myself of the habit, exact amounts of what I'm using of any given thing, because I am still kind of tweaking those ingredients. But by the time we get done today, I'll know exactly where I want those to be. And I will write the complete, full, final recipe down in the show notes. So you'll have access to exactly what you need. You can copy and paste, so you can print it out. And today, just sit back and enjoy it. We're just going to do some cooking together, get a little canning done, and we're going to put some wonderful stuff on the shelf. All right, so let's talk about how I got from shepherd's pie to cottage stew. Shepherd's pie, as you probably know, is traditionally made with ground lamb. Well, in my area, ground lamb is twice as expensive as organic grass-fed ground beef. So I went with organic grass-fed ground beef. You use either, certainly doesn't have to be organic or grass-fed, but you choose whether you want to do ground beef or ground lamb. Some of you may have far better access to lamb than I do, and that's cheaper. Fantastic. I would love to do this with lamb, but for this recipe, I'm going to use ground beef. So that took us from shepherd's pie to cottage pie. So then next, how do I get from pie to stew? Well, you know, the pie, it has the mince, as Gordon calls it. It has the meat mixture with all the vegetables and everything down below in a pie dish or a cast iron pan or, you know, whatever you're going to serve it in. And then you put whipped mashed potatoes with a bunch of cheese and stuff on top and stick it in the oven and it gets all golden, crispy, beautiful, right? Well, I want this to be able to go to work with you, or to go to school with you, or to go on vacation with you, whatever. It's not just, I don't want to just give you the meat mixture and then you have to do all kinds of work to turn it into cottage pie, right? So this is going to be everything in a jar. So I'm going to dice my potatoes and I'm going to put those in with the mixture. And so that's how we got from pie to stew. So I hope all of that makes sense. I didn't want to put a misleading title on there, but I knew no one would know what the heck cottage stew was if I put that as the title. So that's what we're going to make today, and I think you're really going to like it. So the first thing I'm going to do is get these potatoes washed up, peeled, and soak it in some water to try to get some starch out. And then we're going to get a move on. All right, so as I'm peeling these potatoes, I'm using gold potatoes today because that's what my grocery store had. I wouldn't want to use russet potatoes in this because I think they're still going to be too starchy even after all the soaking we're going to do. So I'm just going to soak these in an ice bath and rinse them maybe a time or two and they come out just fine. It used to be that if I were going to put potatoes in a recipe I was going to can, that I wanted to parboil the potatoes to get some of the starch out. But the soaking method, as long as you rinse it a couple of times and make sure that all of that starchy water is gone, then you should be just fine. Makes it much easier than pulling out another pan to parboil. Okay, so I'm going to peel everything in this one because I don't want little peels floating around. This is a beautiful stew. It may not look absolutely gorgeous in the jar, but when it comes out, it really is beautiful. So Gordon uses for his vegetables onion, garlic, carrots, and then of course he does the potato topping. A lot of people use peas, and I don't know whether that's an American kind of thing. I don't really know. But anyway, I'm not going to use peas today. I had intended to use peas when I made this first batch, and I forgot. And then I went back and I looked at Gordon's and I thought, he didn't use peas. So I'm not going to use peas because this was absolutely delicious the way it was. And I don't really want any peas messing with the texture that we have going on in here because it's really quite good. The next thing I wanted to say is that I should start peeling. The next thing is that several recipes out there use Guinness Stout or some other form of beer for this. I didn't do that either. One, because I don't have any. Two, because I'm just not a huge fan of the flavor. Gordon used red wine. So, I'm going to do as Gordon did, and I'm going to use red wine. And he might have been the only one I saw who used red wine. There might have been one other. But anyway, that's what we're going to do. This is a very, very rich dish. And so when David and I were doing the taste test yesterday, his thought was, well, I don't see any carrots and there are no peas in here. Well, the man doesn't like peas or carrots, so I don't know why he was complaining about that. But here's the thing. When Gordon did his, he shredded the carrots. He didn't use peas. He diced the onions very finely, and they really just kind of melt into the mince. So when I did this version the other day, I just diced them really finely, and I really like that. But I do think today I'll also do some chopped a little larger so that you can still see the carrots in there. And I won't go as large as I'm going on the potatoes. I know that most chefs will tell you, make sure you dice everything the same so it cooks exactly the same. Well, I want some that is blended into the meat and just really becomes a part of it. And I want some that is still obviously a carrot. So we're going to go against all the chefy rules here, I guess, and do it my way. I don't know. I'm going to get all my vegetables prepped because everything goes so quickly after that. All right, the first thing we want to do is get these potatoes diced up and into an ice cold water bath so that they can start leaching out their starch. So as I said, these are golden potatoes, but you could use anything that's not starchy. You could use a non-starchy white. You can use a red potato would be fantastic. I don't know if I'd go with a colored, like a purple potato, but yellow potato, non-starchy white, or a red potato, which of course has white insides, would be perfect. I'm going to dice these about the right size to sit on a spoon and know that they're there, right? So I'm going to do a little bit of measuring here so that I can keep accurate notes for you. So I will rinse these out, dump the water, start over at least once, maybe twice. We'll see how much starch comes out. Okay, so I'm going to put those in here. So if you're watching this during the month of October 2023, remember that currently my code for Nakano knives will give you 20% off. I have it listed down below. It's Grow and Preserve, all one word. But I have a direct link listed down below. 3 cups. Okay, so my potatoes are in here soaking. They're already giving off some starch. You can see the water is already cloudy in there. So they'll give off a good bit more and take care of that for us. Now let's get on to the carrots. As I mentioned, I want some carrots that are very fine, and they'll essentially just melt into the beef. And then I want some that you're going to recognize as carrots. So let's leave a couple of these out that we will recognize as carrots. Let's leave the 3 smaller ones here. And we'll dice these a little more finely. Well, a lot more finely, quite frankly. So I said Gordon shredded them. I'm not going to shred them. But I am going to dice them very finely. I'm going to do the same thing with the onions, although I think I'm going to go ahead and just dice all of those very finely. They melted in so beautifully. And when these things melt into the beef, you know, they add a richness and a sweetness almost. It doesn't taste sweet, but it does. I don't know really how to describe that. This is a very rich stew. Let's dice that a little bit finer. It's finally cooled down here in Tennessee. I have the door open and it is wonderful weather for heating up the kitchen. It's probably, well, let's see, it's 59 degrees out there. I love it. These next ones will go a little bit larger of a dice on. Still don't want them to be huge. No, I'm not making beef stew here. I am making something that, as Gordon says, is all about the mince. This is a hot pack today. I don't know if I mentioned that. I've been doing a lot of cold pack, raw pack recipes lately, and they are super easy and fun to do. But they don't work for everything. You know, often you need the flavors mixed up. You need to be able to taste exactly what you're doing before you put it in a jar. You need, in this case, we're going to need the wine to cook off. We're going to need the ground beef cooked, of course. So, hot pack it is, but it's really not a big deal. It all goes in one pan. I'm going to do the ground beef first, and then I'm going to remove it, then do the vegetables, and then put everything back in the pan and add the seasonings and the wine and the tomato paste and the Worcestershire and get it ready to go. And then we're going to put it in jars. I'm going to heat my jars today, of course, because I'm going to be putting hot liquid in there. And I'm going to be doing this in the, I don't know if you can see it, no, it's just out of the screen, but I do have my Presto electric canner out. You know, it pretty much lives on my counter these days. One of you just got one and you said, oh my gosh, you didn't tell me to wait a ton. I'm like, well, yes, it does, but it really leaves my counter. I'm not sure whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I use it all the time. I also had another question about whether or not it's good for a beginner, and that is an emphatic yes. It makes it so easy. Let's get a couple of stalks of celery in there, and I want it diced very finely. I am not one to like to bite into a piece of celery, you know, like in a chicken soup or something. You might be. I know a lot of people love celery. I like what it does when it kind of melts into something. So we're going to dice it up very finely. If you have someone in your family who doesn't like celery, you won't know it's there. but it does do something really nice for the flavor. So, as I said before in some of my meal and jar videos, I want to make sure that what we come up with is going to work at the office. You know, that you're not going, well, shoot, I'm not home to bake this, I'm not home to cook rice, I'm not home to, you know, whatever. So I heated it up yesterday in the microwave because my assumption is that that's what you have at work. I mean, if you work at home, but still, you may be on a time crunch, as I generally am. Or you have kids, you know, coming home from football practice or running to football practice, and they need to be able to just grab, heat it up, and go without leaving a huge mess in your kitchen, right? All right, I'm gonna leave the garlic alone for a minute, and then I'm gonna move on to the onion. So we're gonna dice these onions very finely. They are going to melt into the meat. Just sweeten it up a little bit, give it some great flavor. But you won't look at this and know that they're there. Okay. I'm going to stop at 1½ onions. These were relatively large onions. All right, I want a couple more things chopped up and ready to go because, as I said, once we get this going on the stove, it goes very quickly. So I want to get the herbs ready to go. Now, normally, if I were just cooking this for dinner, I would, you know, tie this up, throw it in a wad, and then fish it out later. But I don't want to risk any stems getting in there. So I'm going to go ahead and pull some off. This is fresh rosemary I picked this morning. You could definitely use dried. I used dried on the first batch. Rosemary and thyme are the two herbs. So a couple of recipes used bay leaf. Gordon did not. I have found that in canning, sometimes a bay leaf takes on an odd flavor. I mean, of course I would take it out, but I'm not sure it works perfectly for canning, kind of like sage. So I may just be extra sensitive to those things. All right, I think that's going to be enough of the rosemary. Now I'll see what I can do with this tangle of thyme here. pretty tender little stems. So anything that gets in there stem-wise, I will just chop up. So we'd rather tie it up and just stick it in there and then pull it out, of course, before you go to can it. That would be fine. But I really don't think it's going to do enough cooking on the stove to impart all the flavor you might want from it. So by the time this goes in to the jar, the meat will be fully cooked and the vegetables will be kind of par cooked. Certainly edible as they are, but par cooked really. Except for the potatoes, they'll be virtually raw, right? We're going to put them in kind of at the last minute because I don't want them turn into a starchy mess in the jar. All right, I'm going to call that good. Now let's just chop all of this up together. All right, so my herbs are done. Just set those off to the side. We'll get the garlic ready to go. And then we're ready to start cooking. These are really large cloves. This is music garlic. It's the first time I've grown a hardneck garlic. And I really like it. The cloves are just humongous. So I have saved some, set it aside for planting. I tend to plant my garlic here in November. Our ground won't freeze till January, maybe December if we have a winter like last winter. But I'm not too worried about that. So probably right around second week of November. All right, let's dice this up. If you want to get out a garlic press, I have one, of course, but I do find it kind of a pain in the tuchus to clean. So I'd rather just take a couple of minutes and dice it very finely by hand. But a garlic press is certainly fine. You can microplane it, you can do whatever you want. We do want it to be tiny. I don't want to bite into a big hunk of garlic in the middle of this. Because remember, it's all about the mince. I'm going to link Gordon's video down below. All right. Okay, my garlic's ready to go, my herbs are ready to go. I'm going to wash off my knife and we're going to dump the starchy water from the potatoes. And we're going to cook the ground beef first and then remove it from the pan. And while I am an advocate of fat, particularly from grass-fed ground beef, I feel the fat is very beneficial to us. I am going to remove most of it because this is such a rich dish. So you'll see me do that, and then I will cook the vegetables in the remaining fat. All right. All right, I'm going to dump this bowl. You can see that it's, I don't know if you can see that on camera or not, but it just gotten pretty starchy. I'm going to fill it up one more time and let it sit in that water while we get the meat cooking. All right, so I'm going to get the meat over to the stove and bring you over there, and I'll see you in just a second. canned a whole bunch of bacon bits not too long ago, and I have this fabulous jar of bacon grease. So I'm going to start off with a little bit of bacon grease just to get the meat started so nothing sticks. I'll get this meat in here. All right, the meat masher out. Now, if I were cooking this truly for a shepherd's pie or cottage pie, we're going to be eating it straight, I would cook until I got a good little crust on the meat. But because it's going in the pressure canner for 75 minutes, I'm not going to cook it that far. The vegetables, I will cook until they caramelize a bit, and I will get that good crustiness still on the bottom, and then we can pick it up with the wine and the stock. Now, even though I'm using wine today, some recipes use beer. If you'd rather just use beef broth, that's just fine too. I'm going to go ahead and season the meat. I'll also season the vegetables. I'll give you all the measurements I use down below, because I will taste this to see how my seasoning is and adjust as needed. I'm adding the salt and pepper. And I'm going to really mince this down pretty finely before it goes into the jar. All right, my ground beef is looking just the way I want it to. See, it's a relatively fine mince. Now I'm going to get this out of here and into a bowl, avoiding much of the fat, and then I'll do a little better strain on it when we go to put it back in. Remember, I'm going to use some of this fat to cook the vegetables in. Sorry for the stainless on stainless noise. Okay, there's my meat. Let me pour a little of this off. Okay, I just have a little bit of that left. Let's get our veggies in. Turn the heat back on. I'm going to cook these on a medium-low so they can soften and then caramelize once the water's out. All right, I'm going to throw the garlic in here as well. I'm going to go ahead and season the vegetables as well. A little bit of salt will help bring out some of the liquid. So I'm just going to, well, I'll tell you what I end up with. Half a teaspoon there. So I want these to cook down until they are translucent and starting to caramelize a little bit on the bottom of the pan. Then I'm going to throw in the potatoes, warm them up just a little bit. I'm going to put in tomato paste. This is one of the things that thickens it up for us and makes it really deep and rich. So we're going to use about half a can of that. Again, full measurements will be down below. Other ingredients going in, some red wine, some Worcestershire sauce, and some beef broth. Now this is homemade beef broth, obviously, but use whatever you have. That's absolutely fine. If you use like, what is that? Better than bouillon or some type of, bouillon mix like that, just check your sodium levels because you may not want to do any other seasoning or may want to cut the seasoning down or whatever. This does not have any salt in it, so I'm adding based on that. Okay, these are starting to soften, so I'm going to turn them up a little bit. You can see my dice is in there now. So all that celery will virtually vanish, and the smaller carrots will as well, and most of the onions. Okay, releasing their water now. That's perfect. I'm going to throw the potatoes in. I have them draining. We're starting to get some brown stuff on the bottom, on the sides here. It's exactly what we want. Now we're going to put the tomato paste in. I can make a little well for it. Going in with the red wine. I'm going to get a little more red wine than that. Let's get some Worcestershire in there. Okay, let's get the meat back in. I'm going to try to keep any fat that's gathered down in there. I'm going to try to keep that out. I don't think it's really necessary to just strain it. You don't have to be that careful. It's not like I'm keeping it out for health reasons or for canning reasons. Just really because it's so rich already. All right. cook off for a minute, and then I'll add the beef broth. Let it all come up to temperature. Okay. Well, that's cooking off. I'm going to get my jars heated up. I have the canner turned on. Okay, in goes the broth. I want to see that thicken up just a little bit, and it will, as it reduces just a bit, and that tomato paste does its thing. We'll give that just a few minutes, and then we'll load those jars. Almost forgot our herbs. We'll get those in. Let's take a little taste for seasoning. Now, I'm not going to taste the potatoes, obviously, because they're not cooked. And I don't necessarily want to taste the carrots, so they won't be in there, but I do want to taste the sauce, and I want to taste the meat. Oh my gosh. Right, that's fabulous. I'm going to leave this just a smidge under seasoned because it does get richer as it processes. I'm going to turn this off, and we'll get back over here and start loading our jars. All right, we're ready to get these loaded. The jars are hot. My canner, I don't know if you can't see that in the screen, but it is quite hot. There's steam coming off. So we're going to leave a generous inch on these. And do 3 of them. And I'm going to fill with solids, a little bit of liquid at first. Try to get rid of any air pockets down there. You want to make sure you get a good mix of the vegetables and the meat. We'll come back and debubble these very well. As I said yesterday when I did these, actually it's 2 days ago, I guess, I ended up with 6 pint jars, but I really wasn't happy with my potato to meat ratio, so I'm expecting to get 7 pint jars, but if I don't, if I only get a half pint left for the last one, that's fine too. It will, of course, process for the same time as the pints. My canner is ready for these as soon as they are ready. So if you wanted to put peas in these, you certainly may. Go a little lighter on the potatoes, perhaps. Or don't put the chunky carrots in. Do make sure you put the finely minced carrots in because it really does add to the flavor of the meat. All right, let's see if I can get one more out of here. Oh yeah. I'm going to punch all this down then we'll work on headspace. Resist the urge to overfill these. That's a hard one for me. But do resist it. You don't want any siphoning. The gravy part of this is so good. All right, let's see how we're doing here. It's a little more full than I'd like it. All right, got these really cleaned up. This one I dribbled on the rim, so I'm going to be extra careful. So just so you know, I will, as I said, put the recipe down below, but I use 3 pounds of ground beef, and I have 7 very hearty meals. If you used regular mouth jars, you'd get a little less in each jar. You may have enough to get 8 full regular mouth pints, but as I said, I'm running seriously low on regular mouth pints. Okay, let's get some lids on. I do have my link down below for 4 jars lids. If you would like to use it, it gives you a 10% discount. Gives me a tiny little kickback. I greatly appreciate that. Maybe I'm not supposed to call it a kickback. That doesn't sound good, does it? Tiny little commission, shall we say. I'm going to come back and tighten these a smidge. So I put the lid on till it tightens, or till it stops, and then just a little bit further. I want them a little bit further on all of these. You don't want them too tight. You want the air pressure build up in the jar to be able to escape, but you don't want it so loose that the lid also escapes. All right, we're going to put these, they're a little hot, in the canner. Oh, they're a little hot. I'm going to change out that ring. There's a little dent in this ring, so I'm going to change that one out. Go ahead and get these others in. All right, 1 second. All right, do be sure you're checking your rings every time. You know, we end up with so many rings as canners. Just if there's a dent, I don't know if the camera will pick that up, certainly not from this far away. But if there's a dent, if there's rust, if there's whatever, just ditch it. It's not worth risking your jar not sealing, especially when you have meats in there, expensive ingredients. All right. All right, so I have a full canner. Water in there is hot. Put the lid on. Twist it to the locked position, put this down. I'm not going to put the regulator on yet. It'll tell me when to do this. Now, I have filled the jars as it asked me to do here. That's it. It's going to start heating up. It's going to do the venting for me. It's going to beep at me when I need to come put the regulator on. And then it's going to beep at me when it's done. I mean, seriously, that's how easy it is. So yes, is this a good canner for a beginner? Absolutely. Is this a good canner for someone who's been canning for a couple of decades like me? Yes, absolutely it is. Because that's really the last of the thought I have to put into this until we're done. And even then, actually, I think I'm done with all my thought process going into this. Okay, so I'm gonna let the canner do its thing, and we'll come back when they're done and make sure everything came out okay, but it will. No worries. All right, I'll see you soon. Okay, the timer has gone off. It's showing that we're done. So I'm going to unplug it, open it up, and let's see what we've got. Ooh, lots of steam. Okay, can you see in there? Everybody's looking good. Looks like I only have one that has not sealed yet. So let's get these out, see what they look like. Okay, so now you can see, looks pretty good. You could actually see the chunks of carrots this time, which you really couldn't the first time I did it. I think I have plenty of potatoes in there now. Let's see if they all look so good. Yeah, these are looking great, and they smell so good. All right, well, you can tell we're getting into fall because it's always dark when I finish up, and I'm taking these jars out of the canner. But we are all done for the day. Everything, nope, still waiting on one to seal. So everything is looking great. I hope you'll give this a try. I thank you for being here. I hope that you kind of like the round 2 version as I'm kind of working through all of my measurements. So as I said, I'll put the final recipe down below. And I'll also have links to Nakano knives along with the 20% off discount code. And I'll have the link to 4 jars. And I have a new Amazon storefront. So if you want to go take a look at that, I've tried to put in there everything that I use on a regular basis. If there is something there that you see me use all the time and it's not there, ask me. I've either forgotten it or I'm not happy enough to recommend it. So please ask me about that. I think that's it. Thanks so much for being here. Don't forget to subscribe, share, like, all that kind of good stuff. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.